there are a lot of jokes made about Kentucky, and every time I'd say, well, I grew up really my first 7 years in California, and it's like, who were you born? Kentucky, and then they'd make your parents are brother and sister. Until Oh Brother Where Art Thou came out. And Oh Brother Where Art Thou, because it's so good, it's so funny, it's so snappy, it's so witty, and the music is so good. It actually changed the way people in this country view Appalachia. Right? Like the whole first of all, it showed that it showed a part of the country most people aren't familiar with. And then it made people like that, and it made them like the culture of that part of the country. And for that to happen, that blew my mind. That blew my mind. And I'm a sucker for musicals anyway, and this is one of my favorite musicals, even though it's not like a traditional musical. But yeah, that's why Oh Brother is my number 4.
But let's look at some other films. Okay, so I've got 29 5-star films on Letterboxd, 29 perfect films as far as I'm concerned, and any of those really could be seen. 28 of those films could be seen at any time. I do have one on there that I'm going to admit right now that if you look right there, there's one that does not match the others, and that's really Matt's fault because he does ridiculous things with his ratings sometimes. So I usually take this very seriously, but I could not help myself. I took a trip down to Dallas a few months ago and watched Invasion USA at the Great Texas Theater, one of my favorite theaters in the world. And Invasion USA was just all that you want from a Chuck Norris film. Complete action, complete blowing up, absolutely zero storyline. And so I couldn't help myself. Obviously, that's not a perfect film. That's ridiculous. I would never say it. It should not even be in the category of Manhunter and some of these other films that I have on here. But you know what? It's funsy sometimes. It's not always serious. Hello again. Welcome back to Matt Men Movies Podcast. My name is Matt. I am half of this show. And as you can see, I'm actually only half of the show today, as we are doing this a little bit differently. We'll call this our very special episode, whereas I am out of town for a few weeks. So Matt and Matt are going to be recording these podcasts separately. What we did is we choose to fuse questions for each other. I don't know what Matt asked me. Matt didn't know what I asked him. And then we record them all together. I smash them up and I send them out there into the world. Thank you very much. If you're watching on channel 26 right now, we really appreciate that. If you're watching this video on YouTube, thank you as well for that. Without further ado, I say let's get to the show.
So the first thing I'm going to do is talk a little bit about some movie news that hit real fast and furious this past week and was very upsetting. First of all, we found out that the company who owned and operated the 5 Alamo Drafthouse franchises in North Texas, all 5, the only 5, filed for bankruptcy and closed down all of the theaters with zero warning, as in not we're closing down in 30 days, not hey guys, get ready, we're closing down soon, but they went to social media and told everyone they were closed, and most of the employees didn't even find out until they got to work that day. So without warning, the only places my family and I went to go see movies were just shuttered, just completely closed down. And it really sucks because they had some amazing movies showing this summer. I'm looking right now at my calendar for June 2024 that has at least 15 different screenings we were wanting to go to. They had a UHF movie party on the same day they were showing The Wizard, 2 1989 classics. Right now it is Father's Day, and I was supposed to be spending it watching Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade with my kids in the theater, and now that's not happening because, again, they're gone. Just completely shut down overnight. Now, this isn't all draft houses. It is just the ones from this one company. And then, 2 days later, we found out that the Angelica in Plano closed. Just boom, closed down. So now some of your more artsy theaters here in town, except for like the Texas Theater and the Angelica Station, the Angelica at Mockingbird Station, except for like those two and maybe one or two others. All your, you know, fancy artsy theaters are closed. And it's really disappointing because besides the cool stuff they showed, it was also the only place where people seem to still care about movies, which we'll get into because it's something we're going to be talking about later. And the most upsetting thing about this is now I have to go back to the theaters where the last time I was at a non-Alamo Drafthouse screening was at a Cinemark on a Sunday at 7 p.m. back in January. So we're talking almost 6 months ago. For a screening of Godzilla Minus One. And I figured, hey, this is before like it got its extended theatrical run. So this was still the first week it was out. And I'm like, okay, no one is going to be here. My daughter and I can go see this in peace. And we checked, and right before the movie started, we had the 2 tickets in the 4th row, which was the furthest row back before you got into the stadium seating. And right before the movie, we checked, and there was like 2 people at the very end of the row and a couple rows behind us, and that was it. It was pretty empty. So we sat down, then a couple more people came in, and they got almost right next to us, but there was still a seat to my left and almost all the seats to the right of my daughter. And then a couple more people came in, and they filed onto the very right of our row. And then a group of 3 came in, and instead of getting the rows in front of us or behind us, which were almost completely empty, they broke up their group of 3, right, and put like one of them next to me and 2 kids who were older than my daughter but acted younger next to her. So they broke up their party like maniacs to sit around us instead of together a row in front or together a row behind us. And at this point, the movie was basically starting. And unlike the Alamo, once the movie started, they had 32 minutes of previews. 32 minutes. So we're sitting there, and the person next to me is loud. The person next to him is on their phone. And the teenagers next to my daughter, who's also a teenager, are loud. The movie starts. They're talking and laughing, making noises. The guy next to me keeps going, oh my God, oh yeah, the whole movie. The guy next to him goes between being on his phone on TikTok and asleep. And during the most emotional parts of the movie, the teenagers next to my daughter start making fart sounds. And it's like, this is 7 o'clock on a Sunday night for a movie that's not even in English. So you would think that that would be a more selective clientele, and it absolutely wasn't. When I saw Midsummer, even though that was years ago, there was a guy like blowing snot rockets onto the floor right next to me. The movie-going experience has taken such a nosedive, and the Alamo was like one of the only places where it felt like the people who went there actually cared about movies. So that hurt. And then it came out that Sony has bought Alamo, but that doesn't affect the ones that closed down where we were, because that wasn't the Alamo proper. Those were franchised, right? So we might not get our Alamo draft houses back, but Sony has purchased the company Alamo Drafthouse, right? Okay. The problem with this is, back in 1948, there was the United States versus Paramount Pictures, right? Because back during the studio system, the studios owned the production, the distribution, and the exhibition. They owned theaters. And, you know, our government used to care about stuff like monopolies and corporations having too much power, right? And they said, hey, you can't control all three of those because that's a monopoly. You completely run the industry. And they said, well, okay, how about we give up one of them and we'll give up exhibition? We'll give up the theaters because they realized if they still control production and distribution, the theaters can't show anything that's not distributed to them, right? So they're still, in essence, controlling it. And with vertical integration, with all of these streaming services that everybody has now, we've kind of forgotten that this is technically all illegal, right? So the Alamo Drafthouse is staying because Sony's buying them. That's good. But they're now owning a theater chain. And that's bad. That's real bad. What if they decide, oh, you want to see the new Spider-Man or the new Venom or the new whatever? Well, guess what? It's the only place you can go see it. Because that's kind of what it is with, Netflix and anything that's made specifically for certain streaming services. There's literally no difference. So I don't know. I've got a feeling that at some point fairly soon, the government's going to have to step in because these are monopolies again. And that's a problem. That's a big problem. So, yeah, kind of a dark week for news in terms of how the movie industry works because, it seems like the way we've enjoyed doing things since the post-war era are not coming to an end, but they have pretty much ended. So, okay, we have a list of 4 questions.
Boy, I did this to myself, This was one of my questions that I thought of, and I regretted it as soon as I did it. Yet, I do know that I can ramble on forever and ever about this topic. So it's all about the Letterboxd top 4. Probably my favoriteest thing going on in media right now. Letterboxd is awesome. They're always out there on the red carpet, and they always stick that very beautiful and colorful mic in people's face and go, what's your top 4? And it's right now. And then people have all kinds of answers, and they're all wonderful answers. And it's all fascinating to kind of see people who are in the industry that are doing their thing. Like, what are they watching? What are they interested in? Are they going back to see stuff? And it's a lot of times, there will definitely be some complaints during this podcast about where movies are going and how we're feeling about them. But so many times I listen to these actors and these actresses and the people in the industry talk about their love for movies and the movies that they watch. It's not just the new stuff. Like so many times you hear people online saying crazy stuff about, I don't watch black and white movies, blah, 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 blah. But you know what? People are really watching movies and people enjoy that. And people are answering movies from the 30s and 40s. And they're answering things from the 90s that I didn't even know about. And it's been wonderful to see that. So I thought it'd be fun for Matt and Matt to be able to figure out what our top 4 was, what our all-time top 4 was. Because mine changes, honestly. I look at my top 4 as just kind of always evolving. What am I feeling at that moment? What am I feeling about the movies? Is it something that I haven't watched in a while? Is it something that I want to watch again? Is it something that never leaves me? And so many of these films that I talk about are films like that, right? So they're only films that are in my marrow that I can probably tell you from beginning to end, every beat, every moment, every situation that happens in the film, and that's why I love them so much. So you know what? Honestly, I will start out by telling you my top 4 right now. I've got Chinatown. I think this movie has been on there off and on for the entirety that I've had my Letterboxd, but there's not. I don't want to say there's not a better detective film, but man, this was one of the greatest of all times. Jack Nicholson as this character is just the epitome of everything that you want from this character, in that there's a perception of coolness, but he's never really cool. And the getting the nose sliced, so he always has the bandage over his face and stuff, and they're always taking away little pieces from that character. And I just thought that's fantastic. So Chinatown, definitely one of the ones that you will see on my list quite regularly. It's been off a couple times, but it's definitely on the top 4 right now. The second one I have is The Friends of Eddie Coyle, the classic Robert Mitchum film from the 70s. Boy, it is. It's a gritty, it's a dirty, it's grimy. It's about Boston in the 70s and criminals. and criminals who are very successful criminals either. The criminal element in this film is suspect at best. You do kind of wonder how good they actually really were. Obviously, Eddie Coyle has never been good because he is kind of a failure. He's already been busted before, and that's what's going on in the film right now. Is he's tried to get out of the situation that he's got himself in, and it is a very much of a pickle of a situation. Just to remember him watching him get his knuckles beat. That idea that was part of the punishment. Oh man, I'd be a terrible criminal because I don't want any part of that. Third one I've got is Inherent Vice. That's probably the most recent that I've re-added to the list. I think this is the first time it's made it to the top four for me, and it's probably because I'm working on a detective story right now. Just the fringes, just kicking around some ideas, and Inherent Vice is always going to be one of the ones that influences me as I go forward and I create detective stories, because detective is definitely one of my favorite genres, if not my favorite genre to create, and it's fascinating, and all the characters that you can get within that. And you can have the very serious ones. You can have the Sam Spades, and you can have all of those top-notch private detectives that solves the case in the end. And then you can have Joaquin Phoenix doing whatever he was doing in this film. And you know what? Maybe he solved it in the end. Maybe he didn't, but it doesn't really matter. A Shaggy Dog Detective is my kind of detective. Inherent Vice may even be my favorite Paul Thomas Anderson film, if I'm really being truthful. Today it is, and that's why it's on my top four. And number four is just an all-timer. Yeah, I've been with this movie since the early 90s. Maybe I saw it like 89, but Back to the Future is one that it's perfect to me. Like some days I don't know. Maybe I get a little embarrassed when I was a younger man and I was in film school and I was very much a big nerd. That's another topic that we'll talk about in a little while. But it's always something I come back to, and it's always a fascinating film to watch and to enjoy and to feel and to remember. I've rented a theater out for my family to watch it on the big screen because I never got a chance to do that when I was younger. This may be the best trilogy of all time, is the Back to the Future trilogy. And you know what? It's just popcorn fun. And sometimes I just need some popcorn fun. It doesn't have to be serious all the time. If you look at my recent activity, I would say a lot of those aren't always serious. But, it kind of balances out. So Back to the Future is number four. Not in any particular order, though. So I got Chinatown, Friends of Eddie Coyle, Inherent Vice, and Back to the Future right now. Now that this episode is happening and I'm discussing this, I can almost guarantee that is going to change sometime in the near future because I'm going to start stressing about it and thinking about it. But let's look at some other films, okay? So I've got 29 five-star films on Letterboxd, 29 perfect films as far as I'm concerned, and any of those really could be seen. 28 of those films could be seen at any time. I do have one on there that I'm going to admit right now, that if you look right there, there's one that does not match the others, and that's really Matt's fault because he does ridiculous things with his ratings sometimes, so I usually take this very seriously, but I could not help myself. I took a trip down to Dallas a few months ago and watched Invasion USA at the Great Texas Theater, one of my favorite theaters in the world, and Invasion USA was just all that you want from a Chuck Norris film. Complete action, complete blowing up, absolutely zero storyline, and so I couldn't help myself. Obviously, that's not a perfect film. That's ridiculous. I would never say it. It should not even be in the category of Manhunter and some of these other films that I have on here, but you know what? It's funsy sometimes. It's not always serious. The other 28, though, I can definitely tell you that 3 Days of the Condor spent a long time on the top list. That, again, just a perfect film to me. Redford is the best of all of those guys. I've had plenty of time to reflect and plenty of these movies to watch, and I say 3 Days of the Condor is the best of all of those, and Redford is the best of those. The Conversation, it had a nice moment in the zeitgeist. For a while, I think people are already forgetting about it again. Maybe once the new Coppola movie comes out, they'll go back and rewatch some of his classics. But that's one of my favorites, is The Conversation. Saw that in college in my film nerd days, and I don't know how it can be any more perfect. There's a lot of these that we've already talked about, but I want to give a shout out to just a couple of films. The Battle of Algiers, I reference occasionally, but that's probably a perfect political film for what it was doing at the time, for what you could see in the film. And, quite honestly, it's just shot so beautifully, too, that, I don't know, it's just one of those films, and that's definitely one that's always stayed with me. And that's kind of important, too, when I'm looking through these movies, is the ones that last forever and ever. Pulp Fiction is obviously on there sometimes. I talk a lot about Bonnie and Clyde, but you know what? I want to talk about one that's a 4.5. So some of these movies are just great movies, but when I look at my 4.5s, which are almost perfect, that could potentially bump up to the 5-star list and make it to the top one day. There's just always just like the teeniest of teeniest things that maybe I'd change about or whatever it is, or it just didn't set with me at the moment. These things happen. Movies are emotional. Movies are personal, and that's kind of how it goes sometimes. Anywho's 4.5-star movies. You know what? Sometimes I probably watch them more than 5 stars because the 5 stars are perfect. It's so hard to go back. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to hit the mic. It's hard to go back and watch some of those films over and over again. But this 4.5 movie disturbed me to my core. It is one of the very select films that I've ever watched that really changed me before and after, and seeing some of the things, and it's horrific and it's terrifying, it's uncomfortable, and it's all the things that Takashi Miike likes to do, and that's Visitor Q. That is not a it's hard to say a well-shot film because he was doing stuff on video at the time, so it was a little bit different, that kind of stuff. But it is so unsettling. I can't imagine anything be more unsettling. I've seen some things that are equal, but that film was so unsettling to me the first time I saw that it could make the top 4 at some point in time, not for any other reason than it's perfect. It's what it's doing. I think that's sometimes I think I forget is that what is it doing? Does it successfully do that thing? And Visitor Q absolutely 100% definitely does that. I'm not telling anybody to go out and watch it right now. That is up to you. You can read the reviews before you do anything like that. Also, one more thing, let's throw in The Hunt as well. That movie terrified me, stays with me. As I'm looking at it on my list, it hurts my feelings. It terrifies me. It's terrifying. So that is my top 4 plus additionals that could or could not make the list. Some days I do feel silly. Some days, who knows? Cold Blooded, Jason Priestley movie could be on there. I don't know. I could go crazy sometimes. But I try to keep it as serious as possible. That's what I got for you. Let's see what Matt has.
Here's the funny thing. I didn't know you could set your top 4. I just created a list that was my top 20 of all time. My top 4 just are what they are. So I'm going to go by the top 4 that were created like just on my page and not the ones that were in my top 20. They're kind of the same, but they're a couple different. So my top 4, if you go to my Letterboxd, are Jurassic Park, Superman the movie from 1978, Boogie Nights, and Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And I will defend every single one of these. 1, Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park and Superman for a long time kind of went back and forth on which one is my favorite. And I actually think that Superman's probably the better made movie. And it's probably one of the movies I would save for future generations. I think Superman is one of the most visually beautiful movies ever made. I think the writing in it is fantastic. It is, it's very smart. It's witty. It's very sexy when it wants to be, and kind of horny in a way that's still okay for kids, And the performances are fantastic. The production is one of the most impressive productions ever undertaken in the history of movies. At one point, they had, I think, like 12 units shooting on 6 continents. They invented so many different processes to use for this film to make it work, and I really can't say enough good things about it. That said, Jurassic Park's my number 1 favorite, because it's the one, like, I always wanted to make movies ever since I was a little kid, but I remember watching Jurassic Park opening night in the theater, and I remember specifically, it was so late when we left, it was like 1 a.m, that the movie theater, we couldn't exit through the normal doors because those went into the mall, so we had to go through the back exit that went right into the parking lot behind the mall. And I was walking through that dark tunnel and out into the lit parking lot, even though it was dark at night. And I remember adults going, "Oh my God, I'm so scared." And I remember thinking, I was 10 and going, I know these things are fake. They looked real, but like, I know they're fake. And every single person around here is scared. I want to do this. Like, I wanted to before, but like at that point, like that cemented it. That's all I wanted to do. And if I've seen that movie once, I've seen it 200 times. It's my favorite movie to watch in theaters. I think it is a perfect summer blockbuster movie. There's never been anything like it since. The only other movie that is kind of like it in terms of its impact on filmmaking and technology is probably, I'm not even going to say Star Wars, because that's still, except for the motion control, they were still using a lot of more perfected but still techniques that were older, right? I'm gonna like it's King Kong. You've got like King Kong in '33 and then Jurassic Park in '93, and those two are the ones I think that probably changed things the most, right? And it was the first time you had seen something you literally had never seen before, right? Especially with Jurassic Park, because no one had seen a digital character fleshed out, and like you had characters that were made out of metal, liquid metal, or stained glass, or water, right? But never something that looked like a flesh and blood creature standing there, and that's what it did. So just for nostalgia alone, I'd put it at number one as my favorite movie, but there are a lot of other reasons. Like it hits all four quadrants perfectly. Little kids can enjoy it, but it's also scary, and it's a perfect gateway into horror and sci-fi. And most people have kind of a fascination about dinosaurs when they're little, so it feeds into that. So even if you're an adult, it kind of feeds into that oh wow factor you had as a kid. So yeah, Jurassic Park's my favorite. Superman's a very close second. Depending on if I'm watching it, I might say it's my favorite. Number three is Boogie Nights, because I don't know if I've ever seen characters that felt so real and fleshed out as Boogie Nights. Like, I feel like I know all of them. I feel like I know their backstories. I feel like I know exactly where all those characters end. They talk to each other in a way that feels so real. It's almost like, you're just watching something that actually happened. It doesn't feel like people made this. The technique is remarkable, but everything feels so real. The technique almost takes a backseat to it, right? It's definitely one of PTA's flashier movies, but he was also, pretty young when he made it. And that's another thing. To make something like that when you're like 27, 26, that's incredible. That's incredible. And then my fourth is Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, which is it's my favorite Coen Brothers movie. And it was the first time, because my family is from Kentucky, and I was born in Kentucky. I never lived there, but that's where I'm from. And it's weird because growing up, there are a lot of jokes made about Kentucky, and every time I'd say, well, I grew up really my first 7 years in California. And it's like, where you were born? Kentucky. And then they'd make your parents are brother and sister. Until Oh Brother, Where Art Thou came out. And Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, because it's so good, it's so funny, it's so snappy, it's so witty, and the music is so good. It actually changed the way people in this country view Appalachia. Right? Like, the whole first of all, it showed that it showed a part of the country most people aren't familiar with, and then it made people like that, and it made them like the culture of that part of the country. And for that to happen, that blew my mind. That blew my mind. And I'm a sucker for musicals anyway, and this is one of my favorite musicals, even though it's not like a traditional musical. But yeah, that's why Oh Brother is my number four.